go for fancy mode. Here we go. All right. So we'll see how it works. So the point of today's call is just to kind of address like this question of what the heck is perimenopause and what, if anything, can we do about it? And I will be, Jessica, you'll be proud. I'm going to do a vulnerable. This has been like a running theme in our work together is like, do I have to be vulnerable? And I guess you don't have to do anything, right? If it's your own business, but, right. How else are we going to learn if we don't share? And I wish somebody had told me. So who this is for is really anybody who wants a better understanding of perimenopause, menopause, and I would say especially women, because it's going to happen to us, and especially women over 35, right? Because when you're 16, perimenopause, menopause is like infinitely in the future and totally not relevant. But as you start getting into your late 30s, early 40s, this should be on your radar as a thing that's going to start happening. And I will say this information is not meant to scare anyone. Some women swear they just glide through and they have no symptoms and it's no big deal. And certainly, I wish that upon you and everyone you know, but that has not been my experience thus far. And I wish somebody had warned me. So I'm just going to warn y'all. All right. So a lot of y'all know me, but for those who are new, who I am, I'm a certified life and weight coach through the Life Coach School. I am a certified nutrition coach through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. That is new. And I am working toward becoming a certified personal trainer. I've gone through all the materials, but still need to do some study and take the exam. So that is coming down the road. And then I also do a lot of sort of mind body techniques, things to help make subconscious blocks conscious. And even as we get into the woo woo, what is kind of known as energy healing. So some of the tools I use for that, EFT, which you guys might know as tapping, hacking reality, theta healing. And just this summer, I also took Reiki level 1, Reiki level 2. So all the things. But most importantly for today's discussion, I am 50 years old. I am for sure in perimenopause. And like I said, no one warned me. So I am like, why are we not talking about this? Again, kind of under the heading of disclaimers. I am for sure like scope of practice, right? I am not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a nutritionist. The state of Florida is very strict. Some states I could move to and call myself a nutritionist if I wanted, but the state of Florida is very strict with what a nutritionist is. And I am not that. I'm not a dietitian. I'm not going to give you a meal plan. I'm not an OBGYN. I'm not an exorcist, a shaman, right? Like whatever you need to support you on your journey. I'm not a lot of things. And I'm also not an official menopausalist or menopausologist. And yes, I made those last two things up. And I'm also not here today to tell you what you should do. I do love to tell people what they should do. I think a lot of us do. But in this case, I'm definitely not here saying that you should do or not do anything, that you should do or not do what I did, that what I did was even the best choice for me. Who the heck knows? But again, my goal is just for us to share so we can support each other. And while I do have services to sell, which I will mention at the end, they don't directly tie, other than the weight piece and just making health changes in general, they don't directly tie to perimenopause or menopause. So I'm not going to like sell you the cure for menopause at the end of this, but I will mention what I do if it's of interest. Okay, so baseline setting, what actually is menopause? So based on most of the definitions I have seen, menopause is the date of your last period, but you're not allowed to say for sure it was your last period until a full 12 months has passed. So when it happens, you don't know that it has happened until a year later. So it's something that we decide sort of retroactively. The average age in the US right now is 51. That does not mean that you will start having effects at 51. It's usually much before. I'll get to that. If for some reason your ovaries get taken offline all at once, it will presumably happen all at once if there's been some kind of surgery. Not my area of expertise, but if you don't have ovaries, you probably know. And so hopefully you and or Google have more information than I do. So if that's what menopause is, then what's perimenopause? Perimenopause is the time before our last period in which our hormones are all over the place. They're really fluctuating. It can last 10 years. It can start as early as 35. If you think about that average age of your last period being 51, then for somebody whose last period is at 51, if they had 10 years of symptoms, that would be 41. But that average age is not the oldest age or the youngest age. And not everybody has symptoms for 10 years. And I think a lot of the symptoms, especially at the beginning, we miss or we may not identify other than retroactively. I guess it just takes a while to shut down the baby factory, which is probably good because we need a little time, like first round of symptoms, come up with strategies, escalating symptoms, escalating strategies. Maybe it's good. It's generally not all at once. If you've ever worked in manufacturing, it usually takes a while to shut down any kind of factory. So I guess it makes sense. It takes a while for us too. So when I say perimenopause is a time of fluctuating hormones, well, who cares? What does that mean? Well, lots of cells in the body have hormone receptors, including hormones for what we think of as the sex hormone, receptors for what we think of as the sex hormones. So this doesn't just affect, boobs and vagina or whatever, right? This can affect your mind, your body, lots of different places. So one of the more obvious symptoms is your periods start getting weird. They're lighter, they're heavier, they're irregular, just changes with the periods. Other really common symptoms that people might experience: problems with sleep. And of course, if you have problems with sleep, then that leads into fatigue the next day. Sexual symptoms: lack of desire, vaginal dryness. I'll get into my experience in a future slide, but for me, it didn't, when your mouth is dry, you feel it. You're like, my mouth is dry. For me, I didn't feel it like from the inside, but I did have that. Weight changes. Maybe your weight suddenly starts moving around. We tend to start carrying weight more like men carry weight, as our hormones tend to be less specific to women. Women tend to carry their weight more around their hips, men more around their gut. So the dreaded, menopause, menobelly, belly fat, that can be a sign. Digestive issues, brain issues, migraines. People talk about brain fog. I either haven't had that or I just didn't experience it as being foggy. So I had some mental symptoms, but nothing I would call fog. Mood swings, which again, based on my experience, is a weird way to describe what has happened for me, but that's the terminology. Could be memory issues. I talked to a lot of women that are like, I thought I had early onset Alzheimer's and it just was perimenopause. Maybe dizziness, vertigo, aches and pains, heart palpitations, really feeling your heartbeat. Could be dry eyes, tingling in the mouth, hair and nail issues, urinary issues, body odor, hot flashes, night sweats. And you will see, right? Like if you Google perimenopause symptoms, there will be some like hot flashes that are probably on every list. And also every list is different. It's funny because you'll see these articles on the internet that are like the 14 signs of perimenopause, the 35 signs of perimenopause. So, again, if this is something that affects us systemically, the symptoms can be all throughout the system. Right. Next slide. All right. So mood swings. Again, when I hear the term mood swings, I think like, oh, I'm laughing and then I'm crying and then I'm laughing again. That was not my experience. I'll get into more what I felt like. But I think this is really important to call out because, again, if we know, like if this were to happen to us and we know, oh, this could be a sign of perimenopause, then I think we're more likely to get the support we need versus when nobody says, hey, this is a thing that can happen in perimenopause. We just think like our perception of the world is what's really happening. So, what they call perimenopausal depression. Um, and that to me seems like, again, really underselling it. And then, again, all of this is Googleable. Women this age, around the perimenopause and early menopause age, it's the number one age for women to commit suicide. And I think it is really related to some of these mental changes. So, if you feel effing terrible, then it could be because of your hormones. It doesn't mean that the circumstances in your life don't suck. It just means that you might 10 years ago or 10 years in the future be more able to cope with the sucky circumstances. And if they feel really awful and really permanent now, that could have to do with your hormones. And I find it really, I tend to think of myself as like, I live in my head and the body is just the meat taxi that carries my brain from place to place. And so I find it very unsettling to realize how much our hormones are almost like the lenses through which we see life, who we think is hot and when we want to have sex. And, in this case, when we feel like life might not be worth living. So mood swings is a real lowball way to describe what women experience. And so then the question is why? And this is not something I've seen anyplace else, but it's kind of my way of understanding it and explaining it. So this is not backed by science, and everybody has a different experience. But me personally, I won't say never. Like when I first started having my period in my teens and early 20s, I did have some kind of yucky physical symptoms, cramps and things like that. Those got better, perhaps because I was on the pill. I don't know. But I never had really, really bad, like physical PMS symptoms. But I had pretty bad PMS, I guess, emotional symptoms. And again, was not aware that that was going on. But it was to the point where when I was in my 30s, in my 20s, working in corporate, I went to the doctor and was like, I'm evil 2 days a month and I'm going to end up unemployed and divorced. What can we do? And again, not that any of my complaints were invalid. The boss should not have said that. My husband should not have done that. But I took it a lot worse right before my period than I did other times of the month. I was much less able to cope with it. And so what they had me doing was I would take, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not recommending you do this, but what I did, they would have me take 3 packs of pills back to back. So I basically had PMS 4 times a year, and that I could cope with, right? If you're evil to your husband once a year, you're mean to a coworker once a year, you call in sick once a year, right? Like that's kind of a manageable level of evil. And again, not everybody has these symptoms, but for me, I did. And what happened, and it was very gradual, but as perimenopause started to progress, I basically got stuck in that state. Because if we think about PMS being a result of low estrogen, low progesterone right before you start your cycle, well, perimenopause, my understanding is low progesterone, low estrogen. I just was like stuck in PMS. So instead of being evil twice a quarter, it was like for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it got really bad kind of toward the end of April this year. I was like barely functional when I did my last event last quarter, but I was trying to kind of willpower through it. And then when that did not go well, I just went off the cliff, was not well. So I've talked some about my experience. I did have some period changes, a drop in like sort of the wee hormones. And this is not in every list, but my source for this is this book, Menopause by Amanda Thebe, I would guess is how she pronounces. And she talks about there being a drop in oxytocin, which is that kind of bonding hormone. And really looking back, in 2018, I was 44, and I had this moment where I was like, hang on, we have an IT consulting business, but it's very much dependent upon my husband. Like, I do most of the day-to-day work, but it's his skill that we're selling. If he leaves me, I am screwed. I need another stream of revenue that's only dependent upon me. And I think that's directly related to that drop in oxytocin, because before then it had never occurred to me. And to some degree, this is a good thing, right? It's good that we start focusing at that age more on ourselves. Maybe we have kids that are teenagers, they don't want to hang out with us, they're going off to college. Like, good that we start to focus on ourselves and you know, kind of getting our own things going. But again, like, it's creepy to me that this was probably driven by hormones, and I thought it was all my idea. I don't know. It's weird. And this also, the next one kind of developed over time. I really didn't have much interest in sex. I wasn't like vehemently opposed to it, but I was just kind of like, why would you want to do that? It'd be like if your husband came in and said, like, I really want to put my finger up your nose. Oh, we may need to.
Finally, somebody answer the phone. I've been trying to get a hold of Austin thing.
Okay.
Return my call. Nobody will answer the phone.
Okay, so this is what my suggestion, or I can, well, this is the thing, I work off site.
Yes, she does.
I know the park's extremely busy today.
I can't figure out who it is. Sorry, y'all.
Okay, and what's her email?
All right, I know what was throwing me off. All right, sorry. All right, so I'm talking about my sex life while somebody's trying to work. This is what we do. Yeah, so it'd be like if your husband was like, it's really hot to like stick my finger up your nose. It really gets me going to stick my finger in your ear. Like, all right, if you want to, like, knock yourself out. I don't know why you would want to do that. And then just to get really personal, again, I didn't experience anything down there as feeling dry from the inside, but it felt like my vagina was shrinking, like it was cobwebbing over. And again, it was like, I don't know why you would want to put something in there. It doesn't really seem like anything fits in there. And this, if you want more kind of specific to this, I'll give you the link in a minute, but there's a really great conversation on my YouTube channel with Dr. Beth Oreo, who is a pelvic floor therapist, and that is her area of expertise. So it was really in conversation with her, like I didn't go to her as a patient, we were just networking, that I kind of realized, oh, this might be perimenopause related and there's a solution. Good to know. The other thing, and this has been, you know, a long time, but I think it got worse, was having trouble going to sleep at night, a lot of mental chatter, overthinking things, thinking about things, very hard to go to sleep. And then I think well, you know, I'm pretty sure I've always had inattentive type ADHD, but it's pretty much always something that I've been able to cope with, right? Like, I have a system and, you know, I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to willpower through. And it just got to a point in my late 40s where I couldn't like power through and just do it. So it was actually age 48, I got diagnosed. I was just having a really hard time starting things, making myself do things I didn't want to do. And the emotional regulation is a piece of the ADHD too, which might be part of why it was so bad for me. And then, like I said, this spring is really where it culminated. And I was in the doctor's office, like crying, like, I just feel fucking awful. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I don't know. Just all my insides feel bad. And I kind of didn't want to tell them anything specific because I was pretty sure it was, again, hormonal and emotional. And if I had said, like, I feel it in my chest, well, then they send you for an EKG, right? And we want them to do that. We want them to rule out the other more scary things that it could be, but also to believe us that this is happening. So anyway, it was not great for me, although I'm sure some people have had it worse. So if you're watching this and you're wondering, well, am I in perimenopause? If you are Googling your symptoms or you're Googling what are the symptoms of perimenopause, and things that have happened to you are on the list, and all the other causes for those symptoms have been ruled out. Because what tends to happen, right, is again, if I had said, I don't feel good in my chest. Okay, well, we're going to send you for an EKG. Maybe we're going to admit you to the hospital. Maybe we're going to send you to a cardiologist. We're going to run a whole bunch of tests, and then we're going to tell you that you're fine. And it's like, okay, I'm glad I'm not having a heart attack. And also, what was that? So if you have things where the doctors are just like, you're fine, you're like, but I don't feel fine, probably it's perimenopause. If it's a possible symptom and it's not something else and you're in that age range, probably that's what it is. And so usually then people want to go and get a test so they can know for sure. Some people do that and swear by it. Some people won't do it. I don't know what the right answer is, but I will say, if during this period your hormones are fluctuating, then the test you do today might be different from the test you take tomorrow, might be different from the test you took yesterday. So it can be kind of inconclusive. And also, a lot of times, no matter what the test says, your doctor will tell you it's normal. Because think about it, if we're in a time when our hormones are fluctuating, then if they're high, that's normal. If they're low, that's normal. Everything is normal. There's nothing wrong with you. You're like, but I feel awful. The other piece to know about this is that doctors, even OBGYNs, may actually not be trained or be very minimally trained to identify and treat perimenopause. It's technically not a disease. It's a natural process. Although you can bet if it happened to men, there would be congressional hearings, right? It would be, like we've had terrorism crisis and war on drugs. But there would be a war on perimenopause if it happened to dudes. But a perfect example of this, Dr. Mary Claire Haver, who I'm going to reference, I think it's on the next slide, was an OBGYN and talks about when she was a resident, a baby doctor, that they would refer to women like me as a WW, which stood for whiny woman. Like there's a WW in 4. And they would go in and the woman would say, I'm having all these symptoms. And the doctor would be like, yeah, getting old sucks. Good luck with that. Go away. So the patriarchy is a thing. Next slide. All right. So some resources, Dr. Mary Claire, which some people don't like her. That's okay. But this is specifically what she talks about on Instagram. Kelly Casperson, MD, is another one that talks about perimenopause a lot on Instagram. We can't believe everything we believe on social media. We can't even believe everything a doctor says, but, decent-ish resources. Books, I already referenced this one. I have some other good ones to let you know about. This is probably my favorite, and this is Dr. Mary Claire Haver. Again, this is her new book, and she has in the back of the book, or I think you could probably find it again through the magical power of Google, she does have a list, may even just be a whole chapter on like what the symptoms could be and what your options are, possible options for treatment. And I think there's a little, I don't see it right now, but I think there's a little tear out where you can like check all your symptoms and then take it to the doctor and be like, I'm having all these things. This one is okay-ish. Dr. Lisa Mosconi is a researcher, and she's researching the effect of menopause on the brain. I don't know. I didn't find it like super mind-blowing, but maybe it's because it's one of the later books that I read and I was kind of like, yeah. But anyway, that exists. Also this one, which is a little woke. If you don't like that, this one's not for you, but it's available. The author is Heather Corinna, Corinna, and I'm sure there are other books that I haven't found. I also have this one, but I'll talk about that when we get to it. So Instagram, books, your peers, and this is whatever you're comfortable with. But I find when I start asking people, like nobody has volunteered to tell me about this, but when I start mentioning it, a lot of my friends and peers are like, oh yeah, girl, I went through it. This is what happened. This is what I did. You should try this. You should talk to this doctor. So there may be more resources out there in your personal circle than you know. My YouTube, I already talked about Beth Oreo talking about some of the sexual symptoms and what can be done for that. And then Rita, who is here with us today, we did a great interview, a great conversation about what changes with exercise when you're over 40. So that is a great resource as well. What did I personally do about it? And I'm going to try to start wrapping up here shortly because I want us to have time to chat rather than just read slides to you the whole time. But in my opinion, as we start getting into our 40s, we just can't get away with what we got away with before, at least not without bigger consequences. And I always think about this like, you know, in bowling, when you take a little kid bowling and they have those bumpers. And then when you're an adult, they decide, oh, you don't need the bumpers. You can stay out of the gutter on your own. Like, no, I can't put the bumpers back up. I'm not a good bowler. But I think about it that way. Like the stuff, you know, I used to, when I was in college, I could drink as much as I wanted on a Thursday night. And then I would get up Friday morning, take a couple of Advil, drink a glass of water, and I could be in an 8 a.m. class. Like I didn't feel super great, but I could do it. As I got into my 40s, I'd have 1 or 2 glasses of wine on a Thursday night. And the following Monday, I'd still kind of be like, so again, I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do, but for more reasons than just that one, I did end up cutting out alcohol. My husband had also stopped drinking a couple of years ago. So we just don't process it the way we used to. So do whatever you want, but just know you've probably already noticed the hangovers are way worse and last a lot longer. Along those lines, I don't think our bodies process refined carbohydrates, things made out of flour, sweets, the way we used to. And I really think in time, this is probably dramatic. I always get told I'm overly dramatic, but maybe other people are just underly dramatic. I don't know. But I think in the future, we may look back on the amount of like packaged, processed, refined carbs that are normal and in our diet now, the same way we kind of look at smoking, that we just don't know how much it's messing us up. And I think it's kind of, if not addictive, addictive-y. And I talk to so many women, and again, I'm sure there are people on this call who have seen me eat a cookie. I, you know, occasionally have dessert. I occasionally have a sandwich. It's not a life or death, all or nothing kind of thing. But I talk to so many women that when they really cut back on the flour and the sugar, they just feel so much better. So it's something to consider trying. I have a friend, I really want to interview her for my YouTube channel. She's not a client, but she's lost 11 pounds. And what she was doing was still trying to keep all those things in her diet. She was doing Weight Watchers. So she'd like, yeah, I would use all my points on chips. And then when I got hungry, I would eat the free foods. And she's like, I finally just decided like my body doesn't do well on this stuff. So I've cut way, way back on it and I feel so much better. So do what you want, but I talk to a lot of people who have that experience. I've increased the amount of resistance training I'm doing more days a week, walking. I do strength train once a week for 30 minutes, which Rita will tell you is not enough, but it's a step in the right direction. And I have some plans to add more of that down the road. I have never been, you know, there's some people that are like, you know, high school athletes and exercise science majors, and, you know, they get really upset when they're 2 pounds overweight. That was not my experience. Like I said, I kind of live in my head. But again, at this age, the more we can start to bring that in, the better we're going to feel over the long haul. Just to get really personal, vaginal moisturizer. When I started having that experience of like, it feels like my vagina is shrinking. And that is different from lubricant, but lubricant is a good idea too. Presumably you all have already discovered that. But vaginal moisturizer is more like what you put on your face. right? Some of them have hydrolonic acid. Again, if you go back to the video with Beth Oreo, I think she mentions some specific products. For me personally, getting the ADHD diagnosis, and then this was not all at once, but over a couple of years. First got diagnosed at 48, then tried to understand, okay, now that I know I have it, what the heck is it? How is it manifesting? How is it causing problems for me? I am taking a little bit of medication. I think the doctor would like to titrate that up, but I'm coping-ish now, so I haven't wanted to do more. And then coaching, somebody that, and Jessica was my coach for ADHD and we still work together. Somebody that talks to, right? It's like anything else. Could I figure out how to change the oil in my car? Probably, eventually. But somebody that does it over and over and over again, they know exactly, where the little thing is and what goes with what motor. And like, it's just going to be a lot faster and easier for them. So somebody, whatever your issue is, somebody that solves that problem over and over and over again is going to have right at their fingertips a lot of strategies and solutions that may be helpful for you as well. And then for me, and this is as of, I'm trying to think, I think end of May, beginning of June. I am on hormone replacement therapy. So that's estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Plus, she put me on an antidepressant. And in general, I don't really want to be on any kind of medication at all. So we've already cut that dose in half. And I've already talked to her about a plan to come off of it. We're not doing that right now because she's got her little science experiment with all the different levels of all the different hormones that she's in the process of. And it does make good sense not to change more than one thing at a time. That's definitely something I learned from IT consulting. You change 3 things, you have a problem. You don't know which of the 3 things caused the problem. So once we get those stable, my plan is to come off of that. But full disclosure, I was a hot mess and you got to do what you got to do. I talked to a friend of mine the other day who said, oh yeah, I'm on hormones. My doctor put me back on the birth control pill. That is not the same thing. Now, if you're 42 and you go to the doctor and your only symptom is my periods are erratic, they might put you on birth control to make your periods more predictable. And if that solves your problem, that's not bad or wrong. But just, it's a different thing. The other thing is if they just give you antidepressants, that is also not the same thing. I'm a big believer in root cause. So if the root cause is I'm running out of hormones, then give me the hormones. I don't really like being on prescriptions, but for me, it has helped a lot. So how can you get help? Obviously, education, being on things like this today, talking to your friends. Start with the lifestyle changes because it's kind of stuff you want to do. You should do anyway. And it's hard to believe before you make the change, but I promise you will feel better after you make the changes. And also, I believe some people can make every lifestyle change in the book and buy every over-the-counter thing in the book. And it's just, if the root cause is I don't feel good because I'm low on a hormone, then, it may not solve everything. With HRT, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, what most doctors primarily are looking for is hot flashes. Because everything else they can kind of explain away, but hot flashes usually are an HRT thing, and excessive sweatiness, which I think, if you live in South Florida in July, you have excessive sweatiness. We all have that. So that's really typically what they're looking for. The testosterone, again, it helps with a lot of different things. The only one that presumably the men at the FDA care about is low sex drive. And then again, I'm not a doctor, but my understanding is if you're getting estrogen, which kind of builds up that uterine lining, you also need the progesterone, which takes it back down. So those 2 usually go together. And you do not have to be, I kind of thought you had to be like done with periods in order to get HRT. You do not. I'm still having periods And because I'm still having periods and having sex, I'm still on birth control, and I've got the HRT layered on top of that. So y'all are hearing all about all my business. Buyer beware. There are a lot of companies who have done the market research, and they know we are desperate and they want our money. So be a little cautious about, over-the-counter tests, supplements, other solutions. I'm not saying that all of that stuff is not good, but there's a lot of people out there that are not interested in helping and are interested in your money. So be cautious. Which kind of leads to like, okay, if I've gone to the doctor and I've told them about these symptoms, why haven't they given me HRT? And I think the reason for most doctors is there was a big, splashy, dramatic news event in 2002 where the Women's Health Initiative did this study, and they came out and said HRT is linked to an increased risk of blood clots, stroke, and breast cancer. And a lot of that, there is some question about how in good faith that was. And I wasn't there. I don't know. But if you're interested in that story, this book, Estrogen Matters, which is by a doctor, Avram Bluming, MD, and Carol Tavris, who is a PhD, this really goes into the story of the people. If you believe this guy, some of the people who were involved with that 2002 result came into the study believing too much HRT has been given out, and they were looking for this result. The other thing is a lot of the people in this study, maybe it's a 71-year-old who's never been prescribed HRT. They're getting prescribed it for the first time. They have some of these symptoms. Well, that's not the clinical use case that most people go in for. Most people go in, again, late 40s, early 50s, perimenopause. So there's a lot of question marks about that study. And some of those are even being raised by the people who did the study themselves, but they've been a lot quieter about this. So there's this kind of like, oh, never mind. And this is from 2013. And if NPR is too woke for you, Google it. This is not the only source of this information. But they basically say, so this is one of the ladies that was involved with the study, this Dr. Joanne Manson. Hormone therapy is appropriate for women in early menopause because they are likely to have quality of life benefits that outweigh the small likelihood of adverse effects. But this is kind of boring, right? People forget the purpose of any news agency. And I'm not saying reporters are bad and wrong, but they're like all the rest of us. They have to make money. So they have to have a shocking headline, something kind of clickbaity to get the attention, to get the eyeballs, because that is what they are selling to advertisers. So if everybody is on HRT and they say HRT is going to give you cancer, that is big news. If hardly anybody is on HRT and they come back and say, actually, we were wrong and it's totally fine, it's kind of boring. Nobody cares. So even the people who said it's going to kill you are saying, oh, never mind. We were wrong about that. And that just has not been as newsworthy as the first announcement. So if you go to the doctor, they're not helping you. It's because A, they didn't get a lot of training on it. And B, they're probably still in that 2002 mindset. And they probably don't know about all of the subsequent. So in conclusion, to get yourself, there is help available. Advocate hard for yourself. Don't be afraid to be, weird and awkward and pushy, because that may be what it takes to get you some relief. Switch doctors if necessary. If your doctor's like, I don't believe in hormones, well, I do. So, you may have to go to a doctor that believes hormones are a thing. I would invite you guys to talk about it amongst each other and warn the next generation, right? You probably don't want to tell them when they're 13 or 15 or 25, But if you have daughters-in-law, as they start getting into their late 30s, I wish somebody had given me a heads up. So I would invite you to do that for the future people. It's a lot easier to find information now with the internet, but you have to know that what's happening to you might be perimenopause in order to search for perimenopause to find out what's happening to you. So I think it just needs a lot more awareness. So since this is my paid Zoom account, of course, we're going to do a commercial for me. I am primarily a weight coach for women in their 40s and 50s. And I do that through supporting clients, getting them in the right mindset to help them make lifestyle changes. So if you're wanting to change your diet, cut out alcohol, add in more movement, those are all changes. Let's be real, at the end of the day, free will is a thing. I can't mind control everybody into doing what I say they should do. But again, right, I solve these problems for similar clients over and over again. I've gotten pretty good at it. If you go to lisaduke.net/testimonials, I have like a whole bunch, over a dozen testimonials out on YouTube. I don't think I'm actually sharing this with you, so I don't think you can see it. New share. Yeah, so I got a whole bunch of testimonials out here, and different people have had different results, right? Some people lost a lot of weight, some people lost not much weight, but you can hear from them what their experience was like if that is of interest. And if you are interested in me supporting you, the first step is a free initial consultation, lisaduke.net/schedule. If you go to that page, which I will have to share, new share website. So come out here, scroll down. You can jump on my online calendar. I do work during the workday. So I know for some people that's a deal breaker. Sorry, it is what it is. I'm not the only weight coach in the world. But for my life, #boundaries. I work during the workday. And so I'm available to people that have a flexible schedule and are able to do that Monday through Thursday during the workday. If not, again, Google is your friend. But I think I'm pretty darn good at it. I'm happy to help. The way it works is people hire me for, they hire me for a month at a time. We do 4 1-hour sessions, and it's a combination of me teaching what has worked for my other clients this age, and also getting really into your mind, helping figure out what's in the way, whether it's a conscious block, a subconscious block, working through that. So I'm available to help you. And then if that works and is good and you like it, we do another round. If you complete the whole 4-round program and it doesn't work, then you just tell me. You feel bad, I feel bad, I give you your money back. It's okay. But again, most of my clients have had benefits, and beyond just weight loss, right? We end up talking about life and work and family and all kinds of things. So I've got a lot of good training. I'm happy to help. And then going into the fall, I will probably be doing some personal training, either in person here in Stewart, or it can be done online. So if that is something that is of interest, a lot of clients now are really into the weight loss medications. They may not necessarily want to do the mental and emotional piece, which I kind of think is necessary, but if that's the case, they'll be able to tell at some point. But even if you lose weight through medication, I think all of the medications that are in market now, you will lose muscle as you lose fat. And therefore, resistance training, strength training is very important to try to preserve that muscle and or bring it back afterwards, because little old ladies need muscle. It's important. So that was a lot of talking for me. I went longer than I meant to. My apologies. But I know some of y'all wanted to share. So does anybody have anything they're willing to share? Any questions they want to ask? If so, just unmute yourself and go for it. Shauna, I know you said you've worked with some clients. Are you willing to share kind of any takeaways, any tips? And let me see if I can make you big for the recording.
Absolutely.
Um,
I'm Shauna Smith, just brief introduction. I'm a women's health expert, particularly in alternative methods. And so that's where I've worked with several women who are going through the perimenopause transition. And, it's just important for me. I love to get to the deepest root of anything that I'm doing. And so looking at perimenopause and what it is and what we're going through, the deepest root also needs to take into account what we're struggling with underneath the surface, the things that science doesn't really address yet, right? We know we know the hormones, we know all these things that we're going through. And we are also these emotional beings having these experiences. And so that's something that I just always think it's important to go to the root.
yeah. Do you have any quick tips or takeaways that people could do perhaps for free?
I do, absolutely. So one thing that I like to address is that when you're looking at the transition into menopause, we must be able to release, surrender, and set free. This is my little business partner today. And when we are struggling with any of those things, then we will have a more difficult transition. And so that is the biggest area to address is like, okay, how can we surrender? How can we go of control? And that's where I was going to do a plug for you, Lisa. I've actually done some of Lisa's work, but that is one of the key areas to address is to look at, what's going on kind of in our subconscious, in our mind, what we're believing, what we're doing, all of our thoughts become actions and those kinds of things. And so one of the things that's really helpful is to work with a specialist like Lisa to release some of these ideas, emotions, to really clarify for ourselves, what is our vision for this next phase of life? Because the biggest challenge for women, when you're really looking at what's happening in that curve, and you say, okay, what else is changing in our lives? We're going from what is considered to be the traditional role for women to have babies, right? Like that is the thing that sets us apart from everything else in the world. We're the only things that create human babies right now. And so
until the Matrix, right? That
yeah,
what you said right now, my brain went science fiction, but go ahead.
Yeah. And so when we no longer are doing that per se, what is our value to society? What are we here to do? What can we do now if we can't do that? Right. So we have to unplug from that value system and we have to plug into what is the vision for the next half of my life? Like life's not anywhere close to being over. My value has not stopped. In fact, it's increased. How has it increased? Right. So you have to decondition, deprogram what we thought our value was on a DNA level almost, right? Like our genes are like, hey, you're supposed to have babies. And then let's say you never did. Let's say that wasn't ever part of your life. It's going to make that, maybe for some women that helps the transition because they've already made peace with it. And for others, it's just another invitation of that loss that they've struggled to really accept in their lives. So, that's where your work can come in handy as well, Lisa, to just say, okay, like I want to reset my value system and see I am a valuable woman. I am a desirable woman at every phase of my life. And how do we really embody that vision of that my life has just started and I get to create a whole new reality. One of the things I always like to plug is that when we're looking at our reality, we only know what we know. Like you said earlier, Lisa, what we've been exposed to. There are several cultures in the world that never experience menopause. That's actually a thing, right?
Or they stop having periods, but they don't have as much drama, right?
Well, some of them don't even stop having periods, right? In
Wow.
high estrogen consumption countries like in Asia, the women never stop menstruating. So to know that that's a thing kind of expands the bubble of what's possible, right?
Mm.
So when you have that high consumption estrogen diet, then you don't shift in the hormones the same way we do in a work focused, production focused culture where results are what are valued. You see this transition into menopause being much more difficult for women.
Mm.
And so that's something else to just kind of know and be aware at the root. It's like, oh, actually, there's other people in the world that this isn't even a thing. Like, not only is there not a difficult transition, but they never stop menstruating. So, thinking about it differently in our culture and how we're addressing ourselves as women is a really key factor.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And if I can put you on the spot, Rita, I know you work with this population a lot as well. What are you willing to share either from your experience, what you see with clients, what we need to be thinking about? Give us the scoop. I'll make you big. Oh, you gotta unmute. I might could do it. Can I?
I did it.
There you go. Yay! Technology.
So
Good job.
what was my experience? I'm kind of a unicorn. I was many years postmenopausal before it even freaking dawned on me. I think I went into menopause at 48, 49. I had assumed at the time my period stopped and I thought, cool. I was someone that manipulated my birth control pills so that I didn't have a period anyway. Then and I did this as a personal trainer and a fitness professional for many years, overexercised and underate. And I was under high levels of stress. I stopped sleeping and my periods went away. And I thought, oh, it's hypothalamic amenorrhea. I've just leaned out so much that my body said, you don't need periods. And it was like years later that I went, oh, maybe that's a menopause thing. And in fact, when I opened my fitness studio at one point, one of my clients came to me and said, why don't you have this doctor come in and talk to us all? Because the average age of the clients at my studio was 45. A third of them were over 60. He could talk to us about menopause. And I said, well, that's like old lady stuff. And literally, as a fitness professional, I just didn't know. My mom didn't talk to me about it. I had no idea. So I never had a hot flash. I might have had a couple night sweats, but I don't know. I live in Florida. I wasn't sure. In hindsight, knowing all of the menopause symptoms that I know, I'm like, oh, those were symptoms. I just didn't realize, I've exclusively and obsessively have studied this stuff for the past 3.5 years. I'm a certified personal trainer, I'm a certified menopause fitness specialist and a nutrition coach. And I only work with women in this demographic because that's who I am. And, and it's interesting to me. I think because of the amount and the people that I follow on social media, I see people talking nonstop about menopause, but I do see a lot of opportunistic cash cows and it drives me nuts. So I think on one hand, the fact that they're removing the stigma and people are talking about it more is wonderful. On the other hand, would I like to punch Drew Barrymore in the face? Yeah, I would, because she has a supplement that cures all of the symptoms of menopause in this pill. And I'm like, come on,
Mhm.
So I do see a lot of people. I see a lot of accounts on Instagram going, oh, I'm over 40. I'm a menopause expert now. And I'm like, based on what? So I do think that there's some good and bad. And you do have to, like Lisa said, do your due diligence and checking out how do you know, where did you read it? If you Googled it, if it's on PubMed, so you really do have to do your due diligence and advocate for yourself. I personally, a couple of years ago, went to 2 NAM certified OBGYNs, and that's North American Menopause Society, because I started to learn about hormone replacement therapy. And I thought, oh, what a good idea. I wish I started it almost a year ago. I'm 59. I wish I would have started it 10 years ago, not because of my symptoms, but because of the massive health benefits. So I went to 2 doctors. Will you test my hormones? They said, what symptoms do you have? And I said, really, I don't have any. And they said, well, then why test? And I got up and walked out. Not after educating them on why test. And I thought, I understand that's a snapshot, but it's also a baseline. So there is some validity to doing that.
Mm-hmm.
When I did have my ARNP test my hormones, they were beyond flatlined, like 0.2. It's like, we got to give her some score. Let's give her a 0.2. And so I went into a doctor in town. I did my research and said, I'm going to tell you exactly what I want to do. And I said, I probably know more than 95% of your clients, but I don't know as much as you. And this is a brand new area for me. Tell me if I'm wrong. I said, this is what I want. And he said, it sounds on track. But going to these 2 North American Menopause Society specialists that were trained in menopause only wanted to treat me if I had symptoms. And I said to both of them, what about the brain protection? What about that estrogen is cardioprotective and neuroprotective and muscular protective? And what about my bones and my longevity? Well, you're not having hot flashes. So there really is there's a lot to learn, a lot to know. And I don't know what else I can add to that.
Lift weights, eat vegetables, drink water.
Absolutely. I mean, that is a non-negotiable for, I think, all women. And I have clients that are a little bit on the younger side that are offended by my saying midlife women. I'm like, you're 40. What do you think midlife is? The sooner you can get that muscle on your body, and a lot of women don't like the term strength training or resistance training because they think they're going to bulk up. I've been doing resistance training since I was 47. It completely changed my body. It shrank my body. It defined my body. And getting that muscle on your frame is a longevity benefit. Most women don't think, boy, I wish I had had some muscle. But I was thinking about that this morning. I thought the alternative to that, you have to think, if I don't have muscle, I'm going to be frail.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you fall
Yeah.
down, 50% of women over 50 are going to break a bone. 30% of those women are going to die within 1 year, and that's with surgery. I mean, that sounds really fatalistic, but I thought, I don't want to break a hip and die in a nursing home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not on my watch. So the sooner, like, women in their 30s and 40s, get that muscle on your frame now, because it's harder and harder and harder. When your hormones decline, we become anabolic resistant, and it's harder to get our protein, to assimilate our protein. It's harder to put muscle on.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
I mean, and I don't just advocate for strength training. I also believe there's a lot to be said for movement, for mobility. I've been teaching dance, movement, and fitness for 45 years. It's what I do, and it's looked differently over the years based on my season of life. But I think that, I now have and teach in my programs with my private clients a pretty good balance of focus on strength training with a little bit of power component, some flexibility and mobility and balance work, and a little bit of cardio.
Yeah. Cool beans.
And then you have time to sprinkle in all those other things that you like, if you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Becky, you don't have to come on, but this is a personal invitation. If you have anything you want to share, anything you want to ask, I'll give you a minute. Oh, all right. Let me make you big.
Sure. I mean, I just want to, say, and I think Jessica agreed, I, not necessarily having symptoms per se, except for a lot of weight gain recently where I've maintained, for a long time. And then all of a sudden I'm just having a lot of that. And a year ago, my OB was like, oh, yes, your labs say you're in perimenopause, but your periods are regular. So we just kind of wash our hands of you. And I just don't understand that thought process. Like why? And then, like you said, they don't count you as even being in menopause until it's been a year since your last period. And it's like, why do we have to suffer per se for that whole time? Why are we not getting ahead of it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the problem is finding a doctor that will listen to you. That's challenging. And I'm a working single mom. I don't have all the time in the world to doctor shop and try and find somebody to get on the same page.
Yeah. And
so challenging.
Yeah. Depending upon, how I tend to overshare. So it's not as difficult for me to ask, but some people are very private. But if you feel comfortable, start asking your friends. Like I asked Rita just the other day, the doctor I go to only treats folks that work for the city and the sheriff's department. She's fantastic. But if I have friends in the area that are having symptoms, they can't go to her. So I just yesterday texted Rita. I said, hey, I have a friend that is melting down. Who do you know? Who do you recommend? And I've got another friend who's a realtor, and I texted her because she had admitted to me she'd been on HRT for a while. So I'm like, who do you go to? Who believes this is a thing and that, relief is available? And this is just, not everything is about man bashing, but this is just to me yet more proof of why we need female doctors and female architects. And right, like it's imaginary until it happens to you. And then they're like, oh, this is a real problem. So yeah, Jessica, I know we're about at time, but I want everybody to get an opportunity. Any questions, anything to share? You want to give us a little commercial? Tell us what's on your mind.
No, I appreciate you sharing all this. I remember meeting you at a networking event last year, and your pitch was about weight loss over 40 and all of that. And you are just so much more. And I really appreciate all the information that you shared. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm just 38. I don't need to worry about this. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm good. I'll figure this out. But then as I've gotten to know you, and now this year, my 40th birthday is approaching, I'm like, oh, taking the literal, now I'm almost 40. Maybe now I can think. But just considering the hormone replacement therapy, that's kind of what's been on my mind lately, because I have my own just menstrual issues that cause so much hormone imbalance in me, and just so many other symptoms, and endometriosis and PMDD and just all of these other things. And now I'm hearing that I should also be looking out for perimenopause. I'm like, whoa.
Like I haven't solved the issues of my 30s yet. You're telling me there's new stuff.
Those are still hanging out, causing havoc, and now there's more to look forward to. Yay. But I think for me, the one thing that I continue to promote is advocating for yourself, being your best advocate, saying you're going to do something and following up on it, because at the end of the day, I know that if I'm not taking care of myself, then I'm not taking care of, I can't take care of anybody else around me. And there's a lot of people I take care of. So for me, it's really essential. And now I'm at the point of, so I have a doctor's appointment coming up in August, and I want to make the question be, can you test my hormones? Is that the question I should be asking? Rita, I was kind of wondering that when you were talking. Lisa, is that the question? Is that where we could lead with when you go to the doctor and just see if they say yes?
I think Rita would say yes. And I would say, I mean, you can, but then so what? Right. So maybe just bringing up the question of like, hey, I'm hearing about perimenopause. What are your thoughts? How do I know if I'm in it? How do I know if I need treatment? Rita, do you want to jump in as well? Because I know Rita's done a certification on this.
Yeah, I do. I would ask, because one point is, I don't ever recommend that HRT can be a lifesaver for some women. However, it's not going to correct lifestyle habits. So if you don't dial in your stress, your sleep, your nutrition, your fitness, you have to dial in all those components for HRT to be able to best do its job.
Mhm.
I like having labs because it does give that baseline. It's not gonna, there's no diagnosis for perimenopause. There just isn't. But it is gonna give you that baseline level, and it could also show, we tend to become more insulin resistant. We have higher cortisol when our insulin's all over, or when our estrogen's all over the place. Our thyroid gets off, so it can red flag something else. Before you start looking, kind of the hierarchy is gonna be your cortisol and insulin, your thyroid and your adrenals, and then your sex hormones. So you want to make sure that you're ruling out other things. I found out that I had a thyroid issue in 2020. I had no idea. And my doctor called, they said, did you gain or lose weight? Or you're hot or cold? And I was like, no. And they said, guess you're good. And I was like, cool. I think I created those thyroid issues through all of the shit that I did with over-exercising and undertraining. So I think that yes, and I asked my doctor for that. I said, will you do a lab? And if the answer is no, would you please write in my report that you refuse to test my hormones? They don't like that because that could be a lawsuit. Would you please write, I asked for thyroid, they gave me the TSH. I said, I want all 6 panels. And if you don't, not as a threat, I said, but please reflect in my chart that you refuse to do this for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
a lot of times they'll
that's
turn
great.
around. If they don't, you kind of do have to go find someone that you can work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my doctor, at least, was very much of the mindset of, we're going to treat the symptoms that you're having, right? Because there has been this controversy in the past about HRT. Like, let's not start with the nuclear option. So when I started when it felt like my vagina shrank, we started with estrogen just in that area. And again, there's a lot on this in the conversation with Dr. Beth Oreo on my YouTube channel. So we started just there, and that does not circulate. So if somebody is really worried about breast cancer and they're just putting it in that area, again, I'm not a doctor, but my understanding of the research is that if you put it in that way, it stays in that department and it doesn't move to the other places. So if you're worried about breast cancer, but you're having symptoms in the lady bits, treat the lady bits, the boobs are left out of it. And then I do think it tends to be something that escalates. So if your systems escalate, then your response escalates along with that. But I kind of thought menopause happened in your 70s. And I kind of thought, even once I figured out, like, oh, it's happening to me right now, I thought I had to be officially done having periods before I could get HRT. And again, it kind of depends on the doctor. If the doctor is a woman who went through this herself and had symptoms and sought treatment, she's going to be very sympathetic. If your doctor's a dude who thinks it's imaginary, then
My doctor's a dude.
And again, not all dude doctors are bad. Rita's got a good dude doctor, so I'm not saying we shouldn't allow men to be doctors. But it very much depends upon, their philosophy, their experience, how up to date they are. But my doctor was like, let's treat the symptoms that you're having instead of starting with HRT just for localized symptoms between my legs. We'll get the systemic when the problems are systemic. But I think the biggest thing is probably knowing that mental piece, because I've never been on anything for my brain. Maybe I should have been, but I've never been on anything for my brain until 48. After it was later than that, because I got diagnosed at 48, but I didn't do any medication for a year or two after that, I wanted to kind of sit with it for a while, see what I could do just from education. But, just knowing that, like, yes, your circumstances are real. And if they're shitty right now, I'm sorry. And also, it may feel super awful because you're looking at it through the lens of those hormones. There's videos out on my YouTube channel where I did 2 videos back to back, but then I released them spread out with Catherine McCord, where we were talking. Jessica, I think we talked about it during a session. I had this like incident with this man in downtown Stewart, and I probably my hairstylist and my manicurist, like every woman in my life, I like went through this incident and like what happened, and it disturbed me, and I was bothered about it for weeks and weeks. And I was asking a lot of questions about like, why did this happen? The question I did not ask, that in retrospect, I probably should have been asking, is why is this bothering me so much? Like, yes, this old guy was a jerk. Yes, it's totally appropriate for me to be bothered by it. It's totally fine to talk with a friend or two and hash it out. But the fact that I couldn't let it go, and I was like so destroyed by something a stranger said to me on the street, like that for me was that emotional regulation and getting on the HRT, and possibly, I can't tell you, right? And that's why I decided to come out and say I'm also on a very small dose of an antidepressant right now, because I can't tell you if it's the HRT that's helping with the mental or the antidepressant. But I kind of think it's the hormones most of all. So anyway, we are way over time, so I probably need to let y'all go. Thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing. And I'm around if anybody, y'all have my email address, lisa@lisaduke.net. If you have questions, if you are interested in coaching, or maybe even training in the fall, and also referrals. I know a lot of cool people, so I'd be glad to help in any way I can. Y'all have a good day. Take care. Bye.